Oh. Hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Day In, Day Out podcast. Today, on episode 264, I am very lucky to have Professor Christine J. Cole on the podcast. She is a professor of dermatology and pathology in like some, I don't know, some poxy small school in America called Yale Medical. How are you today, my lady?
I am very good. I am very good. It's fun to be speaking with you.
Oh, it's fun to be speaking with you. I have to say, with the two things you are a professor of, this must be a very fascinating time. One with COVID like coming and going, and now with the rise of monkeypox into the realm. You must be like, is it exciting times for you, or you're like, yeah.
No, it's been a ride, right? I'm sure as for everyone. It's been a crazy pandemic, and now this monkeypox thing coming out. Yeah, it's monkeypox actually does really have the potential for skin manifestation. COVID does too, but I think it's more uncommon. It's more the sort of the unusual kind of, although I think also the COVID toe phenomenon is sort of not super rare, but I think people got used to it once it was in the media and didn't feel the need necessarily to go to doctors. So and primary care physicians, etc., would see it too. So I think while initially in dermatology we would see the COVID toes, and I would say initially we didn't know exactly what was going on. Once it hit the media, I think it was sort of just as patients felt comfortable about it, we weren't too worried about it. This monkeypox thing almost is a little different because people, unlike the dermatologic, the skin manifestations of COVID, which were generally, unless you were already hospitalized, in which case you were already hospitalized and pretty sick with COVID, the skin manifestations in patients who were sort of, well enough with COVID to be not in the hospital were pretty minor. But what's happening with monkeypox is that some patients are getting pretty sick and they can present with these skin findings and, not necessarily present in hospital. And it is contagious, just like the way chickenpox is. So, COVID's contagious too, but it's just sort of, I think it's on another level.
Well, yeah, like this is a thing. Okay, one of the things I had no idea about until now, COVID toe, like, yeah, what?
Oh, okay. You did.
Oh
Okay.
no, I did not know about that. No.
Oh, okay. Well, so interestingly, this COVID toe phenomenon, that's what the media called it, sort of popularly, popular media, and it caught on, is you would just sort of get these reddish or bluish or purplish toes, usually digits of your feet, but also sometimes your fingers. So it's sort of the wrong name because COVID toes makes it seem like it's only your toes. And really rarely it might be like another, like your ear, something that sort of sticks away from your body and maybe is sort of slightly colder body temperature than the rest of your body, maybe. But yeah, your toes would be bluish red and painful, kind of. And so we call that, in non-COVID times, we would call that, it has a fancy name. It's called herniosis.
Penny, look, you know what? I've just not even 5 minutes. I've learned two things already: COVID toe and permeosis.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, the
Yeah.
fancy name for COVID toe.
Yes, exactly. So we think we've, long before COVID ever hit, sort of in 2019 and then into 2020, et cetera, and on to now,
Yeah.
there was something called perniosis, where your toes, much greater than your fingers, would turn bluish or reddish, and sometimes on and off. And oftentimes in patients who have like a connective tissue disorder, like say lupus erythematosus or something like that, if anyone has heard of that autoimmune disease, sometimes you have perniosis associated with it. So when initially, but that's usually in adults, this Herniosis, and kids especially seem to be affected by this COVID toe phenomenon. So to have kids come in and then you worry about them initially, like, could they have some kind of, autoimmune disease, some disease that's brewing and everything. So that was concerning. And I think parents would rightly be concerned when all of a sudden their child is like, oh, my toes hurt and look at what they look like. But in the end, it was all fine. What's interesting about the COVID toe phenomenon is a lot of these patients never tested positive. Although, early on in the pandemic, especially in the US, for example, we didn't have access to good testing. So, it's a little bit unclear, but across sort of internationally, even now when people present with COVID toes and you try to test them and there's much more testing that's available, they're often not positive right when they have the COVID toes. It seems to be a phenomenon that is happening, at least 6 to 8 weeks after you've had COVID. And so it's not, you're not contagious at that time anymore with COVID. And it's just sort of this strange thing that's happening to your fingers and toes.
Okay. Interesting. No, because this is the thing. Okay, being in the UK, in many respects, okay, now down to like a party our prime minister shouldn't have been at, 1 or 2 or 3. We're not 100% sure how many parties he was at, but he was at. He was, let's just say, he was out there a bit. We kind of ended our lockdown and like quite quickly, and now we're pretty much back to 2019 and everything like this. People like on the trains, transport, everything like this. No one's wearing a mask, not unless you go to a hospital, which I think that should have been something which should have been practiced way before this ever came up. Now, the thing is, you being in what you do as a professor, to the rest of the world, this is kind of like, COVID, it's here, but it's gone. Is it still at the forefront of your mind like it was for everyone beforehand? Or is it kind of like, it's here, but no?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would say that, I'm sure everyone knows people in their lives who in various, throughout the pandemic, some people are more COVID anxious or aware versus others are like, they believe in it, but they're like, they'll wear a mask even when masks were needed, but they weren't ignoring it. They weren't just saying, oh, it doesn't exist or anything, but they were just not as worried. So as background, I would say that I've always been more on the anxious side of it and the worried side of it. So I have calmed down on that, I would say, but just knowing that I start out that way, I would say I'm still worried about it. It's still spreading quite a bit, Luckily, people are not getting as sick, and it's not like people are, rushing in huge crowds into the intensive care unit or anything, but people are getting it. And it's some people are lucky. They're like, it's very mild or it's pretty asymptomatic, close to, hardly any symptoms. But other people are, they're sick for quite a while and or at least have a cough for quite a while. And this most recent variant that at least right now is in this area in the US seems to kind of feel like a really bad head cold. So, but a pretty bad one, and you cough for quite a bit afterward. So it's I think it's hard to just be sick in general. And so right now, my kids are on summer break, but I think part of the worry for me is, the whole cascade effect of, okay, you say if one of my children gets it, then, you have to try to isolate them in the house from everyone else. And then what if they just saw their friend the day before? Then you have to let that family know. And there's not so much, there's never been great contact tracing per se in the US. And I think people have, a lot of people around me have relaxed, so they don't automatically jump off the deep end if you're like, oh, like, there may have been an exposure, and it's summer. But once school starts, I think it's just going to be hard again, because with school, while my kids' schools, I have two kids, one's 15 and one's 12, and they're at different schools. While both schools finally took away the mask requirement in the late spring, my son's school, he's the younger one, he's 12, they still have like you have to stay home. Even if you have any kind of symptom, like even like, you know, a runny nose almost, you know, you kind of have to like get a clearance from your doctor that it's not COVID. So that's hard, you know, so because if you're working, if both parents are working and you don't have anyone to stay with your child, and now especially, you know, with COVID, I mean, people are getting more relaxed, but how can you say, oh, my child might have COVID, but can you come stay with them? You know, so you know, even more so, I think it's on the parent to stay with the child until you know they're okay and they can go back to school. But then if they test positive, then, you know, again, you probably, you know, who are you going to hire to stay with your COVID positive child? So then it has to be you. And if you don't have any flexibility with work, it just really, you know, there's just this snowball effect of consequences from that. And then what about the schoolwork? And what about, you know, the time he's missing? And what do you do with your child all day long at home, especially if maybe you're lucky and your work is like, no problem, you can work from home. But then, you know, I mean, I mean, lucky in one sense, my kids are both old enough to sort of, you know, be on their own.
Yeah.
But my son loves video games. Like he will just play them all day long if I let him. And it's a battle to like not let him, because I'm tired too. Like I just want to be like, yeah, go have fun.
It's like, just like, look, just give me a moment of peace. You
Yeah.
can play any game you want to. Just like, look, Mama wants to just sit down, just take a load off. Look, I've had a long day. I've done papers, everything like this. Everyone, like, look, everybody has called me up about this thing right now. Let me, but it's like, okay, it's been 2 days. You need to get off the computer. Let it go. Let it go. It's like, oh man, that must be kind of very trippy, because like this is the thing. Um, Even though like we kind of look at the world at this present time, it's going back to normal, but it's in this weird transition. So as you say, some people are quite skittish about the whole COVID thing, and others are kind of, how can I put it? Yeah, that they're kind of equating it to now it's just like the flu, when for some people it can be just like the flu, and like, you know what I mean? Maybe like it might hit them hard, it might hit them light, and off they go. And others, well, it will hit them like a ton of bricks, and you're not going anywhere for like a good 10 days to 3 weeks. Uh, I always find it kind of strange right now that people trying to make that transition. Like it's kind of on this weird spectrum. I don't know if you've had that sort of vibe or effect.
No, I agree with you. And I like your term skittish. I
Yeah.
like that. I'll say I'm COVID skittish from now on. Yeah, you know, it's not just the flu in my eyes. And I don't think it can be until we really get rid of all of the snowball effect consequences, right? And I'm not saying that we should get rid of them, but I'm just saying until they're gone, you know, for the flu, we never wore masks, you know, even hundreds of thousands of people would die from the flu, and yet we never wore masks, you know. So this COVID situation is just it's 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 different, and to me. And so at least I think if schools and you know, for example, if at least the schools didn't treat COVID in the way that it does with these like, oh, you know, contact tracing, and now you can't come to school until, you know, you don't have a runny nose, then I think I might be able to be less COVID skittish. But until they reduce some of the chronic stress on parents from that aspect, it's not just the flu, because I used to be able to send my child to school with a bad runny nose, even if I thought it was just allergies. And now I can't in good conscience do that, you know, because, you know, you worry, you know, you don't want to expose a whole classroom to COVID.
Mm.
Um, so So there's that factor. And then exactly as you said, some people are getting really sick still. So, you know, it's just still, I think we just don't quite know enough about it. And even though you can argue, oh yeah, we can't necessarily predict who's going to become really sick from influenza either. Still the numbers I think are greater than for influenza. And I think it seems like at least in the past, now I think that the newer strains, the mutated strains are more infectious kind of. But I think it in the past that wearing a mask could maybe prevent like really severe disease. I don't know so much anymore if that's true. But the last thing I would say that to me makes it different is the long COVID, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you know, most people, even if they have really bad flu, if they recover from it, we didn't have whole hospital clinics dedicated to studying people post-flu, you know? And I think it's a real thing that some people have what becomes chronic symptoms that they never had before, whether it's fatigue, you know, like they just feel like I just don't have the energy, they can't breathe as well. They have heart changes, you know, that they never had. They have, you know, memory issues or just, you know, sort of cognitively, they're not the same. So there's that factor. And for kids too, there's that so-called, you know, multi-inflammatory syndrome that is probably related to COVID, where they kind of get pretty sick also, you know, and it seems to maybe be a post-COVID phenomenon. And I think most of those kids recover, but
Yeah.
they can get really sick. And so I think that's why we can't ever, at least me, I don't know that I'll ever treat it just like the flu unless more becomes known about what exactly is long COVID? Like, why do some people get that? How can we prevent it so that even if you get COVID, you could maybe do X, Y, and Z to prevent becoming a long COVID patient then, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, those are my kind of thoughts on it.
Yeah, I hear you. And like this is the thing. I'm not like I don't think they actually have an accurate number for how many people are suffering from long COVID because like some people just run down or I've like, you know what I mean, been working that a little bit harder. But they might be actually really suffering badly from it. And they'll
Yes.
never know, you know?
Yeah.
Mm. Now, you know, like we started this conversation and like, yes, we pretty much jumped in, boots and all. And I'm like, it's that's all cool. I like it. But you know what? With regards to yourself, now being a professor at dermatology, okay, that's all cool. Like doing one thing, being a professor in pathology, yeah, that's all cool. That's one thing. But why both? It's like, how did
Oh,
you get like, yeah, it's like, yes, I want to do both. How did the
oh.
journey begin for you? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's sort of just I'm not really actually special. I'll say a lot of people have titles in more than one department, and
Okay.
some people have titles in like even more than two, you know. So for me, that's just because in the US, I'm trained in mainly dermatology.
Mm-hmm.
That was my residency, sort of my training period post medical school. And then I did a 1-year fellowship, it's called a 1-year extra training in dermatopathology, which is studying the skin tissue, you know. So if you had if you came and saw me as a dermatologist and I said, oh, like I'm worried about this spot or something, and I took a little piece of it, you know, after I gave you some numbing medicine, of course. um, then that little piece of tissue gets set off to the lab, right? And someone looks at it and decides, oh, this is fine, or oh, this is bad, or oh, you know, whatever. And so that's the pathologist or dermatopathologist, like skin pathologist. And so that was my extra training. And so a lot of what I do is dermatopathology. I look at microscopic slides, so little pieces of tissue that have been processed, and you know, I figure out what they are, what they're telling me. So here at my institution, because I do dermatopathology, all of us who do dermatopathology are part of both departments. We're part of dermatology and pathology. And of course, in pathology, there's like also heart pathology, lung pathology, brain pathology, neuropathology. And so like say a pathologist who mainly looks at the lungs, they might be part of the internal medicine department as well, not always, but sometimes. Or like a neuropathologist might be part of the neurology department as well. So that's what I mean. It doesn't really make me extra special or anything. It's just the way we do it.
Oh, no. You know what I mean? Yeah, you're not special at all. Like, yeah, just a professor at Yale Medical. No, with 2 subjects. No, you know what I mean? You're just an everyday Joe.
Oh gosh, if ever I'm depressed, I just need to listen back to this and have you make me feel good.
Hey, like I've got to ask. So when did you have look? There are professions where people like go, okay, they go to a guidance counselor and go, yeah, I want to earn this much money and blah blah blah. And like, you should be an accountant, or yes, you should do like computer programming, or yeah, you should be a welder, go out to sea or whatnot. How did you get your calling to medicine?
Oh, I wanted to be a doctor from when I was in elementary school. Yes, so it's kind of like almost silly, but this is the real story is that I read a book. I
Yeah.
love books. I still love books, and I read a book about Elizabeth Blackwell. She's widely thought to be the first woman doctor in the U.S. Interestingly, as a side note, my daughter just did a research paper this past school year on for her history class, and the subject she chose I thought was really cool. She decided to write about women who disguised themselves as men to back in I think it was the 1700s
Mm-hmm.
to do something that they couldn't do as a woman, and of course I knew about women writers, who would use a pen name that's male, so that they could publish, but I didn't realize that anyway, she focused on 3 women, and one of them disguised, I think the last name was Buckley, and she disguised herself as a man in order to be a doctor. So in her essay, she's like, so this is actually the first woman doctor, not Elizabeth Blackwell. So it was kind of interesting because I've always thought, oh, I wanted to be a doctor because of Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman doctor. And now my daughter has corrected me.
She's like, mom, you know nothing. You know nothing, mother.
That's right.
You know, I know.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, no, my kids keep me in my place. They are like, who are you?
It's like, I have studied, damn it. I'm a professor. I don't
Yeah,
care.
exactly. It holds no weight with them. It holds no
Ah,
weight with them.
so like, okay. Like, um, after like, so you got this calling to like since elementary school to like, oh yeah, here I am. I want to be a doctor. Like, it's like, wow, how? Why? Like, and was it a case of once you read the book, you were like, what credits do I need? And that's it. You went to town with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no one in my family is actually a doctor. So I think I had a very naive sense of what it would be. I mean, the book I don't really remember the book that I read. So I don't know exactly what it described. It was an elementary level book that I remember. But I got the sense that she was helping people. Or at least that's what I took from it. So I just had this like idea, oh, okay, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to help people.
Mm.
And I thought that I would be an internist, so not a dermatologist. I didn't know what dermatology was. But in, for and I'm Asian, I'm Korean. So of course my parents were all over it. They're like, "Oh, you want to be a doctor? Okay, like, go for it."
No,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say
So
sticking to any stereotype or anything like
yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah. So it was stamped with approval from my family. And I went to, the school I went to, yeah, they did have a guidance counselor, and they're just like, yeah, you apply to college. And then when I went to college, we had sort of I forget the name, but it wasn't really a counselor, but someone who, if you wanted to apply to medical school, they just kind of told you the steps and everything. So I met with that person. So it was pretty easy for me to know what steps to do. And I think in the US, for most people, if they want to be a doctor, and they're at a college in the US, you can relatively easily figure out what you need to do. I think it can be harder if you don't have you're not at a school with a good guidance counselor, or you don't have good access at a college to someone to give you advice. So I think it can be harder. But now with the internet, I think it's not too bad. But that person, when I was in college, did sort of say, okay, so you need to get this many letters, and you need to take the MCAT, which is a test that we need to take here in the States to apply to medical school, and fill out the applications. And so just you go to the schools, and she would also give us advice on which schools to apply to, right? Because there's a cost, and at least at that time, there was a cost involved to applying to schools. So you didn't want to apply to 1,000, right? Because you have to pay then a certain amount. And so, but you need, based on your grades and your MCAT scores and whatever, they would say, okay, you need to apply maybe to this many, so that you kind of maximize your chance of getting in.
Okay. I'm very curious. Like, what would you say were, apart from yes, picking up your medical skills, what would you say were some of the key things you learned about yourself, like on your sort of medical journey?
Oh, that's I will try to answer succinctly. So I now at this point, what I've been reflecting on is that there's been a lot of shame in my medical journey that I really have not thought about from that standpoint. But I have my own podcast, actually, that I only recently started. So what did you say? I'm like number 267 or something? Is that what you said in the beginning?
264.
264. Okay. That's amazing. I applaud you. So I'm like up to like episode 24 or something like that. So I'm a baby compared to you.
You're doing much better than the typical average. It's normally 5 and done.
Yeah.
And yeah. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm trying to talk to people who can kind of educate me on things that are useful, I think, to doctors that I never learned in all the lots and lots of school that I've been through. So meaning things like, even like decision making, right? And doctors have to make decisions. When you give a diagnosis to someone, you're deciding what they have. You might be right, hopefully. You might be wrong, hopefully not. But you're deciding, you're saying, oh, I see this, and this on your skin. And you're telling me this, and this. And then I ordered these tests and I put that all together. And this is what I'm deciding. This is what you have. And so it's kind of amazing to think that no one ever really taught me how to be a better decision maker. It would only benefit my patients for me to be a better decision maker. And so part of that means just knowing the cognitive biases that we have. And cognitive bias is different than like racial bias, social bias, so it's not like racism, right? Cognitive bias, meaning it's bias in that sense is neutral. Where say like racial bias is not, of course. Yeah. Cognitive bias, and that's why bias is maybe bad. So, just to use as a term because it might trigger people, but we all have cognitive bias, meaning that it's just the way we think. So an example of cognitive bias, and to show that it's neutral, is just that the fact that I can read a book very easily, if once we learned how to read and we're not thinking about, oh, that's an A and that's a B, it's just like A, whatever. That's also part of cognitive bias. Your mind has learned to just see something quickly and just assess it, So, and you might have noticed that sometimes you read something incorrectly. You don't know why, but, you're like, oh, I read that as this, and, it's not that. But that just shows, your mind can play tricks on you. So
Mm.
another way people put it is optical illusions, and so there are lots of fun optical illusions now on the internet, or you can find them. Or there was that famous thing with the what color dress is this? Do you
Yes,
remember that?
I remember that. Was it
Yeah,
white? Was it blue? Was it? Uh,
gold or
yeah,
something, right?
I can't.
Yeah, and it went viral because there are people like, I think it's blue. How can it be anything else? And so
Mm,
that's what I mean. Like we have the people that think it's blue, it's like it's blue, and the people that think it's gold, it's like it's gold. And to not be able to meet in the middle and recognize, oh, it's part of it's perceptual bias. There's nothing necessarily positive or negative about it. But the negative thing about it is if we can't recognize that someone else's perception is valid just as ours is, that's the problem. So I think that's that's what I mean. Like I just want to build awareness that um there are patterns to the way that we think. So there's that, for example, or I've been covering emotional intelligence.
ah,
But through that, I spoke to someone. There were several conversations I had through the podcast, and one was where I was talking about communication with Dr. Katie Jobbins, and I was telling her this story about how I had taken my son to a medical appointment, and then I ended up getting upset because I felt like the um, healthcare provider was sort of putting the blame on me for what was going on with
mm,
my son. And she was like, and I felt bad and whatever. And then she made this comment. She was like, oh, like, isn't that interesting that you shamed yourself for having emotions about what was going on? And in the moment I was like, oh, is that what I did? And it resonated with me. So I thought, oh, I shamed myself, I felt ashamed, but I really hadn't done anything wrong. I just felt a strong emotion, and I felt, I just thought at the moment that, he upset me, but it was, I felt ashamed. I felt like I wasn't a good enough mother.
mm.
And then I recently talked to actually someone in the UK named Dr. Luna Dolezal, and she runs this, she's principal investigator for this shame and medicine project, where she's investigating how shame permeates medicine. And she was saying that shame is just everywhere in medicine, and we don't talk about it because we don't want to talk about shame in general. And she defined shame. I didn't even really have a definition for shame until I spoke to her. She said, shame is a self-conscious emotion, meaning that I feel self-conscious. And she said it's in a family, like with embarrassment or even shyness. And then that resonated with me because I am shy. Actually. Yeah, you're kind of like, no, you're not, but I am. So
The
I
lies,
can
people. She is lying. Yeah,
I can turn it on, but
that's
my
what shy
thing,
people can't do.
well, I've progressed. I've learned through my life. I'm learning. I do believe in continuous improvement and learning.
Right.
So but that resonated with me because I feel, for me, part of shyness is I'd rather just stay back and watch, and listen and sort of observe, and then maybe at some point jump in. um and so it resonated with me that she said it's part of this family. Shyness is part of that family. So I was like, oh, I bet I can very easily come to shame, because I'm this shy person. So then I started thinking about my life, and just as your question started off with, your medical journey, like what do you know now? And I realized that had I recognized and leaned into shame earlier, because I only started recently doing, really like in maybe like the last month, I think I would have found everything a little bit easier and more bearable, actually, even though um on the surface I would think, oh no, like shame, like run away from it, that's better, like turn away from it, don't face it, you'll be better off. But I've realized, no, to like face it and just like, oh, I guess I feel ashamed of that, but really, why do I feel ashamed of that? Because when I face it, I realize, oh, I'm making it up, kind of like I don't really need to feel that ashamed about it. And then I can process it better and then fix whatever needs to be fixed, or let it go if it just needs to be let go. Does that make sense?
It it kind of makes sense, but like when, like, this is the thing, when you talk about cognition, in like with cognitive bias. I think it always comes from, like, yes, as you say, from the perspective of yourself. Until you can have someone who can actually go, wait a second, don't you see what you're doing? Yeah, or can't you see why this is? Because like one of the things where I've had this experience where my lady was like talking about one of her friends who, like, yeah, she goes, I don't know why she doesn't, like, you know what I mean, respond to like text messages and like this on WhatsApp, like promptly, or like she just normally just sends a two-word answer or something like this. And I stood there and went, you don't you don't know why? I went, maybe the fact she is dyslexic and like writing is not going to be her major strong point, to like put this down. And like you could see the sort of like the realization of like, oh, come to mind. And like you like go, right. And I think you can't, not unless if you have someone, or you can take that step back and like observe yourself in the third person, which isn't easy in the heat of the moment. It's very tricky, to say the least. And like, look, when it comes to the medical profession, now, when you go to a doctor, in many respects, yes, you're going for a diagnosis and everything like this, but you're kind of like buying into the confidence they portray about whatever that diagnosis is. And if, don't get me wrong, if someone's feeling shame, like, you know what I mean, they're honest about it, to a patient, that might be like, oh, wait a second, so you're not confident about what you're saying and everything like this. So there is always going to be that sort of air of bravado. And sometimes it serves a person well, but in other times it can lead them down the wrong path, which it's always hard to get away from, you know?
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. I mean, I think that for doctors, you have to have that medical knowledge so that you're not just putting on a show.
Yeah.
But I think that patients do have to recognize, and I think any patient who has utilized the medical system enough, and that's different. Enough means different, something different to each patient. But uniformly, my patients at least have told me that they realize that doctors do not know it all. They know that. So I think it's important to have confidence in what you do know, and also to have the confidence to say, I don't know this, and I'm not going to pretend that I don't know it. And that means that I need to send you to someone else, or, if you're willing for me to figure this out and we work together on it, then that's what we do. And I think, but that's what I mean, that I mean, I've done that with my patients for a long time now, not only since I started leaning into shame.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that as a doctor that I should tell like, it's about the patient when they come see me. So I'm not like telling my patient like, oh, like today I felt ashamed because of this, this, and this. But what I mean is, I think I've been able to make patients more comfortable by recognizing the shame that might be there in the visit for them, right? So meaning name it and lean into it from that perspective. So even like that patient gown, right? And you're naked underneath it, at least for a skin exam you are. And I ask people to take everything off, right? And I'm fully clothed, right? It's automatically unfair. And some people will tell me, okay, this makes me feel uncomfortable, right? But a lot of people, they don't say anything, but they are uncomfortable. But it's sort of like, well, this is part of the visit. But if I say, I try now, if at all possible, to meet the new patients before they put on the ugly gown. So I think that helps, because then I'll tell them, look, I'm glad that I can meet you now because, it's sort of more equal. We're both fully clothed. And today there is this full skin exam. So, if it's okay with you, you remove everything. And that just, I think that helps, right? But before, if I wasn't thinking about the fact that it can be a little bit embarrassing, right? That family of shame, to just be like naked in front of a stranger, right? I'm just like, oh, like just walk in when the patient gown is on and just like, okay, do, and I'm, I'm just looking and I'm done. And so I also try to reassure people because I realize even just like when I go to the doctor and it's something simple, like they're taking my blood pressure or my weight, and they don't tell me, like the weight I can see, but they don't tell me what my blood pressure was. And if I don't, and they're just like, and they just move like, and they don't mean anything by that. But I'm like, what does that mean? And then they'll never say, right? But somehow that's so like, did that mean anything? Is my blood pressure okay? And then they're like, oh yeah, it's fine, but they don't say. So I do what's called meta talk, which I learned also through podcasting. And meta talk is just where you're just talking aloud as to what you're doing. So I'll just say, okay, now I'm looking at your face and I don't see anything, and I see this, but it's totally fine. And I'm moving down and I've looked through and everything's fine. And especially for that sensitive genital area, I make sure to say everything looks fine, but but that's what I mean, where I think that, and it's helped. I think you can tell, right? We can tell when someone feels better, right? And more comfortable. And at least for me, I realized that I've been able to make my patients more comfortable by my awareness of it. And I agree also though with what you said, that it's hard to have self-awareness. I think it's extremely hard to have self-awareness. And I think that's why I only came to this realization this late in life after having conversations through podcasting, right? Which and I did listen to your episode, the very first one, or I don't know if it was I think it was one of the first ones where you're like, everyone should do a podcast, and like you're giving reasons and everything.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think everyone should. Like, this is the thing. If you're not doing a podcast, I think everyone should have more conversations with different people. Because like the whole thing is like, I think with regards to people's awareness of themselves and other people around them, it's like you don't actually, like, while you're not having these conversations and it's all about the self, you will never take the perspective of, okay, what is this person feeling like? You'll never be able to consider that in any formal way. Because like when you talk about the doctor-patient dynamic, let's just say, okay, yeah, patient goes in there and like, it's like, yes, I'm like, they're not feeling well, they're like scared, and like, you know what I mean? They're already like coming into a realm, arena where they are out of control, and
Yes.
that might be feeling quite powerless at that
Yes.
precise moment in time. And once you start the examination and everything like this, it's more fear, more terror, no idea what's going on. And like that is, you know what I mean, just a regular everyday Joe or Joanna, like, you know what I mean? Like, it must be worse. Like, I've got to say, now, doctors and nurses most probably are the worst patients in the world,
Oh
because
yeah.
they are cursed with the knowledge of knowing. And like, this is the thing. And when that game, not game, when that scenario plays out, it's also the same thing. It's like, yeah, but like the whole thing is, they're like the things what come into a regular Joe or Joanna of the sort of myriad of things what could be. Oh my word.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
like it, you like the infinite comes into play, and it's like, okay, how the hell can I deal with that? But to sort of skip back, without the conversations on a day-to-day basis with other people, you felt you cannot grow, you cannot get self-reflection upon oneself of who you are. And I would say even the most sort of well-read person, you like, people go, yeah, I know myself. And I would argue that you might know 20, 30, 40% of who you truly are on, like, really. And like, you're like, oh right. And I'll go, yeah, anyone who knows themselves fully, truthfully, they've gone through a whole gambit of experiences,
Yes.
to say the least, and they've asked themselves a lot of questions, maybe have done a lot of things, not always like the best things in life, you know.
Yes. Yes. No, absolutely. I'm with you 100%.
Hey, there you go. But like, this is the thing, like, you taking up podcasting now. Episode 26. Now, what was the thing what kicked you off? Like, you know what? Okay, you're an author as well, but you're like, you know what? I want to do a podcast. Why? Like, why did you want to do it?
I don't have a voice really. Like no one's really listening to me, I feel like. Meaning, so my book, when you mentioned I'm an author, so I wrote this book. It's titled How to Improve Doctor-Patient Connection. And I wrote it less from the doctor side, although the publisher says it's a book for doctors, which is fine. But I really wrote it for patients and patient advocates, you know, because my son was misdiagnosed for over a year when he was a toddler. And so I didn't want anyone to go through that the way I had, if it was possible. And I felt that if you just trust yourself, right, and use a couple of tricks, like just, meaning asking, what does that mean? Like, or why do you think that? Or, in a polite way, because, I think the other thing is patients don't want to be rude to doctors, right? So they clam up and they don't say, right? But it's not rude to say, but I don't understand, like, are you sure? Or I'm still really concerned about this, but people don't want to bother doctors. So I did that with my son, where I was like, well, thinking I'm still really concerned, but she's saying it's fine. So, okay. But I asked one question at the end, when he was 13 months, I said, but is there something, my son is deaf. And so he was diagnosed too late. Well, not too late, but late. So ideally, if you're diagnosed with deafness, you're diagnosed from when you're born, right? And I don't mean to be ableist and say that deafness is universally like a problem or a medical condition, but both my husband and I are hearing individuals. So to have a deaf child, they're not getting the right access to language if you don't know that they're deaf, So in that sense, you need to know. So we didn't know, but at 9 months, I started thinking that he was deaf and couldn't hear, but I was told he's fine. And so at this 13-month visit, she was like, he's fine, and so I wanted to believe her. So that was one factor. I wanted to believe her. There's authority bias. That's a cognitive bias, as I mentioned before. It's like we want to trust the people, just like you mentioned too with the confidence thing. We want the people we know to be oh, sorry, I don't know how to get rid of that thing. I'm going to try to quit, but so I lost my train of thought a little bit. Right. So there was authority bias in the room, and I wanted to believe her. So there was sort of a bias that I don't want there to be a problem, actually, and so but so I asked her, but I was worried enough. So I trusted myself in the moment, at least, to say, but is there something where you hear sometimes and then you don't other times? Because to me, I was like, well, if you can hear sometimes, right? How could there really be a problem with your hearing, And then she said, she was about to leave the room, and she said, well, there's auditory neuropathy, which is what my son's diagnosis ended up being in another year. So it was true at the time. It's just, she studies normal, and that was the wrong diagnosis, at the time. She said, there's auditory neuropathy, but you don't want him to have, like, go under anesthesia and, like, have another test, do you? And so it was the wrong question to ask, right? So she confused me. So in the moment, I was like, no, if he's fine, I don't want him to go under anesthesia and have a test, like I'm not trying to push for like something that's not necessary. But she gave me the diagnosis and I didn't really hear her. You know what I mean? Like I got distracted by the other question and then the authority bias, and I wanted him to be okay. But she gave me the diagnosis. So then fast forward to 22 months, so almost, 10 months later, and we get the diagnosis, and then I go home and I type it in, and I'm like, it described exactly like here. Sometimes seems to pay attention, sometimes doesn't, other times. And I was thinking, if I had just gone home and typed it in, I could have called her and been like, oh yeah, actually I do want that other test, So I think that kind of thing might happen much more than we would want it to. And so what I learned is the patient needs to be able to trust themselves with you, like if in any relationship, right? If the two people, just like we've been talking about in a conversation, a real conversation, if you contribute and I contribute, we're both the better off for it. And the doctor-patient relationship or a healthcare provider-patient relationship is no different. If the doctor or the nurse or whoever says, okay, well, this is the expertise that I have, but you have the expertise in yourself, in your symptoms, in whether this treatment is working or whether you can't even afford the treatment. So you haven't gotten it, and it's not that you don't trust me. It's not that you're lazy or you don't care, but you can't afford it, and your insurance will only cover, like in this country, it's harder, I think, than there. I think it's a little better, hopefully, but the insurance will cover like $1 of it, but I have to pay $1,000. And, doctor, actually, I can't afford it. And there's the shame part, right? I'm ashamed to tell you, right? No one actually says that to me. But when you think about when I realize how many patients actually don't tell me things, that's from shame too. They're embarrassed to tell me. It's that shame family. So ever since I've been trying to be more open with patients so that they're more open with me. Again, I don't tell them all my problems, but just with, trying to make it seem that I am more open.
Yeah.
Like I had a patient who wasn't going to get his skin cancer cut out. He had a fairly large skin cancer here on his face and he wasn't. And I called him twice even. And he's like, sure, doctor, no problem. I will go. I will go. And the second time I called him, he's like, I'll go for you. Don't worry. So the third time I called him, I'm like, you still haven't gone to get your surgery. You said you would do it. And I didn't remind him that he said he would do it for me. We hadn't done it. So, and then he finally said, this is the third time I'm talking to him. And he said, doctor, I don't have a lot of money and I don't think I can afford this surgery actually. And so then I told him, I said, this surgery should be covered by your insurance. There's no, and he was like, really? Are you sure? And at which point I said to him, well, I'm not sure. Everyone's insurance is different in this country. It's crazy. But the practice I was sending him to, our dermatologic surgery practice, I said, they will know. They will be able to check before you even go. Just call them. They will check for you. And if they say it's not covered, just let me know because we have clinics here where I could send you and you won't get charged at all. And then so I finally found out, why he wasn't going. And that's what I mean, where I've been realizing that shame is just everywhere. And he wasn't unwilling to get the surgery, but he was embarrassed to tell me that he was afraid that he would be saddled with a huge cost. And so he was delaying, he was delaying treatment. So in that case, he had the right diagnosis, but he wasn't getting the right treatment. And so back to sort of to summarize what I'm saying to answer your question, sorry for the lengthy answer. The book that I wrote, so I was just writing to try to, because I think patients have a certain amount of power too, right? You can ask politely, you don't have to stay quiet. You can see, oh, the doctor's like super busy today, but you can sort of really initiate eye contact and really look, right? You can smile. I've noticed that patients who I come in and even if like, I'm like, oh, like thinking in my head, this is horrible. If the patient's like you and it's like, hello, right? It's automatically different than if the patient's like, okay, and just kind of looks at me like I'm in the room now. So that's what I mean, that patients can gear up for that thing too and be like, hello, doctor. And I know you seem really busy, but I have 3 things that I really need you to answer for me today. That's really different than a patient just saying, oh, hi, yeah, that's right, I'm Mr. Smith. And then like not saying anything. And why don't they say anything? It's probably, like you said, fear. Like it's not always shame, right? But a lot of doctors, and not purposefully, they're not going to automatically be like, oh, are you quiet right now because you're afraid of something? Like it feels awkward to them. That's what I mean by they're turning away from shame or even other emotions. You're just kind of like powering through sometimes the day. Unfortunately, in the healthcare system in the US. And a patient is able to remind the doctor, like, hello, I'm here, I'm a real person. Please be present with me. And I think you can do that in a very present way. But since no one's reading the book, and I can't really reach patients because they don't know who like I'm a nobody to the, like patients who aren't my own patients, but, sort of the general world. I thought, okay, well, I'll start a free podcast, so that hopefully it's sort of geared towards doctors, it's true. But anyone can listen to like the emotional intelligence things and the thing on cognitive bias, and they're short. Mine is really short, and I think that helps me. They're just 15 minutes or less. I edit them down, but also because people are busy, doctors are busy. So I was like, they're not going to listen to a whole hour, but I try to like make it really short.
You know what? I'll disagree. Like, because
Okay.
this is the thing. Like if you really are touching on a key subject matter, yeah, they will listen. And like this is the thing with regards to emotional intelligence, cognitive bias, and basically sort of like patient fear. Because look, when you were telling your story about your son and like yes he's hearing, now this is the thing, like the thing what really sort of stuck out, even you being a medical professional, like rather than sort of okay, like you had your medical hat on, no, you were in parent mode. And when
Yes.
like I can only imagine, you might please correct me if I'm wrong about this, but when you heard anesthesia, like operation, that's gonna hurt my child. And it's like, I don't want my child to be in pain. And so all of the rest of the information just went by the wayside because
Yes.
that's the association you made. And like, it's so hard, so difficult when it's like, that parent situation, you're like there for your child. With regards to like your patient who's like, you know what, yeah, cut off this face cancer. It's like, okay, can I afford it? Most probably, yeah, his insurance could cover it and everything like this. And it might be coming from a place of vanity where it's a case of, I don't want to have this facial scar. I'm a killer with the ladies, I'm a killer with the circles, wherever like his reference might be. And like, yeah, this unsightly scar might have a scar, this, that, the other. I don't want that. And trying to take in consideration of all of that. Some people might go, that's exhausting. But it's a case of, yeah, but if you're really truly invested in helping people, you've got to take that extra step. You got to take that extra yard, because if you don't, people will feel scared, unheard, unseen. And like, yeah, they will like send themselves down a path which they might not have had to go down, or it might send them down a path of greater harm where they could be like walking in the path of greater good and being healthy and like being better for it. It's just people need to make the effort, like either on the doctor side, and and I know it's hard for people who are facing whatever it might be, a myriad of things from like life changing to maybe might be not here for long, but they do need to like sometimes have that sort of not overly confident or whatnot, just a little bit of courage to go, hey, I am. My name is so and so. Please take account of that, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm. So with this, and like I'm being mindful of time here, like where would you like doing your book, doing your podcast, where would you like your journey to take you over the next, say, few years?
Over the next few years, I just want to increase my sphere of influence a little bit.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is I am hoping that at least say the residents, the medical students, the colleagues that I have, that we can all together be more emotionally intelligent and aware of our cognitive biases and the emotions we feel and how they might be influencing us, for better or for worse. So that's what I would want. And so that's where the podcast comes in, and where, talking to you comes in.
Yeah. So is that the mission? Because like this is the thing. When I hear sphere of influence, that means like, yeah, you you're gearing up for something considerably bigger than what you are right now.
Yes. So it's going to take, I didn't answer this because it's going to take more than a couple years.
Mm.
And I think it would, I mean, hopefully not, but I think it would be more like take a lifetime or more. But I want healthcare to be different. And so meaning I don't think that even in my lifetime that me alone could change it. But I want doctors to be able to practice the way they want to. And I think that the way the vast majority of doctors want to practice is they want to be able to care for patients the way that each individual patient needs to be cared for.
Mm.
And why isn't it happening right now? It's system issues, right? We are time poor, and we're rushing around, and we don't have enough time to address things, especially because of the COVID pandemic. It's made things worse. I think, quite honestly, that healthcare is broken, and it's breaking, and it needs to be fixed, it's more than like just one little band-aid. But the system is made up of people, right? So even though I can blame the system, I'm part of it. And so I guess, like, imagine like this way, right? Say every single doctor, even in my institution, say we all went on strike, right? And we're like, we are not going to see any more patients unless we get 20 minutes per patient, 30 minutes per patient, whatever. We get to control our schedules, and we say this patient needs an hour, this one needs 20 minutes, maybe we don't know, right? The problem with that is, number one, doctors don't go on strike because we care too much about our patients, right? We're like, who's going to take care of them if we just all leave the hospital, right? And that's why even throughout the pandemic, doctors, nurses, staff, from janitorial staff to people working in the cafeterias, people didn't do a mass exodus. I think people are waiting for the pandemic to end for there to be a great resignation from healthcare. But I think for now, that shows how much people at all levels of healthcare care. They're not willing to give up yet. But I think we're burning out, more so than ever. And that leads to bad care. I've done it myself. I don't mean to be pointing fingers or being a hypocrite. I don't call patients back as quickly as I maybe used to. And that's what I mean by leaning into shame. I'll just tell my patients now, I don't check this Epic electronic medical system every day. I don't. So if it's something urgent, you've got to call. But if you email me through the system, just do it, as long as, because it's the easiest way. It's probably the most efficient way. But just know that, be okay with there being a couple days delay, or even a week or two if I happen to be on vacation. And every single patient I've ever said that to is like, oh, no problem. Why would you be checking it every day? You have a life too, of course. So I think by even just saying that, they see that I'm a human being too, right? And it makes sense to them. Like, why would she just always be there? But I think if I don't say that aloud, and then they send me a message and I don't answer for a couple of days because you are anxious, it's like, why aren't they answering me? Why don't they care? But since I've set the stage that, like, I do care about you, but it's the system that I'm not checking every day. I'm not like willfully ignoring the message. I just don't even see it. So I think they see that difference, and it makes a difference to them, as it should. And then it makes a difference to me, because then I've let go of checking the EMR every day, because I can't. It just burns me out. I think I just can't check it. And most of the times the messages that have been waiting for me are not urgent. And I feel better now about knowing, oh, well, I've been telling patients, you can send me a message, but it's not going to be right away. And then I know they're okay with it,
Mm.
So that's what I mean, where I think just accepting my own limitations and then sharing them. And I haven't had a patient walk away and say, okay, well, you're not a good enough doctor then. I don't have confidence in you. So I think little things like that, but instead they're all more and more rules, right? It's like one of the rules is, so I mean, maybe I'll get in trouble for this, but one of the rules is that we are supposed to check the electronic medical record once every 24 hours. So I'm breaking the rule. But I'm kind of like, well, like,
Yeah. Like I think this is a common theme around all health systems around the world. Like the whole thing is because I don't know of any medical system which isn't bloated through the realms of bureaucracy. And because bureaucracy works in a bureaucratical way, it doesn't care who you are as a patient because it's a system. And basically, as that system gets fatter and more bloated and more layers are put in it, it asks the people who work within that system or who use that system as a service to basically to plug into either being this circle, this square, this triangle, and be this ideal little shape so the system can just take care of them, or not take care of them, because if you happen to be a star and you're trying to put them into a square peg, no, it doesn't like it, and basically they fall by the wayside because they can't fit in. And look, don't get me wrong, this is the thing, you go, oh, but there isn't any other way of doing it. I would say, cut the bloat, let people be a little bit more human on both sides of the fence so they can actually have a proper interaction, so they can actually feel cared for, so they can actually feel heard, seen, cared, once again, cared for. It's a triangle. If you don't have all three of those things going on, how is it going to improve the care of that patient? How is it going to improve the level of work for that medical professional, because it won't. It will leave them to the wayside and make them suffer all around. And I don't know how you'd ever make it change if that's all it's got to be. Yeah. You might okay, with regards to your mission and everything like this, be aware, okay, when you put something negative out into the world, you will get a visceral, immediate reaction, and they will come at your doors baying for blood right away. Bam. But when you put something positive out in the world, you might not actually you might not actually see or feel the effects of your positive actions for quite some time. It might not happen in a big way. You might get a nod, and there's a nod and an acknowledgement, yeah, you're right. And it might be like that for months, years, decades. But then all of a sudden, something will tip, and it will come cascading towards you. What I would simply say to you is maintain, hold the line, be consistent. Even when those days when you find it hard, even when those days where you find it painful, when you've mount up so many losses that you kind of oh God, how can I stand? And get up, stand. And find that other person who will stand with you, and find that other person who will stand with you. And then build that team. And from building that team, you can start a movement. And from starting that movement, you can start have something grand, epic, and really make that change in this world. I'll say that to you.
Thank you. That's awesome. I think we're really of like mind when you're talking about seeing, the patients don't want to go unseen, unheard, not uncared for. Totally. I think the seeing, the hearing, the feeling part, that's what it's really all about.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to do if we're just aware, right? But like you said, it takes someone else oftentimes to make us more self-aware. But there's always at least two people in a healthcare interaction, always.
Yeah.
Can't do it by yourself.
And like this is the thing, like this, like it's not just in healthcare where people don't feel seen, don't feel heard, or don't feel cared for. And like this is the thing, like when you like go, what? Yeah, we are in we are in an age where communication is absolutely freaking bonkers. You said this stuff like to me as a child, and like or you as a child, it'll be like you will be able to communicate with people across the world, like yeah, video, TV, and put it out there and everything like this. You'll be like going, you are crazy. That's in our lifetime. Like if you threw that back to your parents, your grandparents, and you told them about this age of just having information at your fingertips, everything like this, they'll be like, what? It would
Yeah.
seem like magic to them.
Yes.
But what I would simply say to you is this: when you were a kid, when your parents were kids and everything like this, I would bet you dollars for donuts, they felt more connected to the world and the community around them than ever before. Now, with all of these things like going on, like, yes, yeah, connect on LinkedIn, everything like this, like have Facebook, everything like that, all of this social media, people do not feel connected.
Yeah.
People are, I've got 1,000 people who know who I am. They follow me. Okay, right. How many of them would you like sit down and go, you know what? These are one or two of my darker secrets. Or like, yeah, or to like take it down to a darker tone. Yeah. How many of them would you be able to call and like, yeah, I need your help. And this might be illegal. No questions asked. Just like, would you come over and help? If you can go, yeah, I've got 3 people that can do that for me. God damn, you're doing very well in this world, especially in this day and age. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for saying that about, you do something bad, people are knocking down your door, you do something positive and it's slow.
Yeah.
That's really helpful to me. I feel very uplifted by that.
Hey, like this is the thing. Like I can feel you have this sense of mission. I can feel you've like found this new like realm of purpose. Like and like this is like it is you are the lucky few because like the whole thing is there are a number of people out there who wish they had a mission. They wish they had a purpose. And it sometimes is sorely lacking. And if you can like go, yeah, I've got this mission, I've got this purpose, this is what I would like to do. It like, yeah, like what you would like what is like what you might get and what might come out of that, it might be totally two different things. It's like, you know what I mean? It's like what we need and what we want. Sometimes, yeah, never the twain will meet. But when you do get them to go together, wow, that is some like mighty powerful juju right there, you know?
Yep, totally. Yeah. It's kind of like put another way, it's like to be paid for what you really feel passionate about. You're like you won the lottery,
Hey,
Yeah.
I hear you. And like this is the thing, I think you will be winning the lottery in a major way. Now, yeah, I do. I do. I can see that totally. Now, I have to ask. Now, yeah, unfortunately, this is going to be my final question. Yeah, yeah. What is something you're grateful for? Something which is giving you gratitude recently.
Oh, I'm so grateful for my family.
Mm.
Just, you know, um, of all the things that I've done in my life, I'm just so privileged to have 2 kids, to have, husband, and then, we only have the 2 kids because I married who I married, and um my kids are just two miracles, you know, I mean, every kid is. And I learn so much from them. They make fun of me all the time, but you know, it's fine. It's good. Like I have learned and continue to learn what love is through them, and that love exists, you know, just because I do love them, and I, at least, you know, like we're imperfect, right? That's the thing. Human beings are imperfect. So if love is perfect, I can't really love, right? Because I'm imperfect, and like an imperfect can't create something perfect. Um, but the way that I feel about them, whatever you call them, you know, whatever you call that, you know, and you know, most people call that love. I don't really know what love is. I kind of, in some ways, I guess I in some ways don't believe in it. But they make me believe in it. And so that's what I'm grateful for. And I hope I continue to be grateful for it and remember how lucky I am, because I think that helps keep us all going too, right? To have deep love is really, I think, what keeps us going, at least what keeps me going.
Ah, perfect. Perfect. Love that. Brilliant. Now, Professor Ko, can you tell the people how they can find you before we go?
Oh, sure. I have a website, so it's just christinejco.com. And I do have a website professionally, you know, at Yale, but christinejco.com has you know, all the stuff I'm doing. It has links to the podcast as well. It has links to the book that no one's buying. But it's out, the book is
Fine, yeah.
totally about seeing, hearing, and feeling. You know, it's about being seen, how to get people to see you if you feel like they're not seeing you, learning how to get people to hear you. And it's focused on the doctor-patient interaction. But as you pointed out, yes, every interaction, right? I mean, in every interaction that we have, even like at the grocery store, right? Don't we want, you know, to be seen by the cashier? Like, isn't it better if we like see each other? So yeah, and it's not like we have to be best friends with everyone, but like you said, you know, we used to have much deeper connections, right? Maybe it was a very small, tight community, like just the people around us, you know. But
Yeah.
now that we can just do all this social media stuff, it's true. I think we're so busy, you know, and we're busy on our little phones, right? It's just like at the dinner, you know, it's just like no one's paying attention. No one's really being present and really seeing each other. So yeah, I'm I'm lucky. I'm grateful also to have spoken with you today. Thank you.
You're most kind. You're most kind. Thank you for coming on today. You have been absolutely brilliant. Professor Ko. Yes. And let me just say this to you, my friends, my life warriors. Thank you for sticking with us to the end of the show. You have been brilliant. She has been brilliant. And let me just say this. Please stay safe, stay well, be awesome, be excellent, be fantastic. Be all the positive bees you can be in this world and then some. And remember, keep pushing forward. Peace. And we are.